Hello and welcome back to another book review by Alice. As I promised you last week, we're going to talk about the second half of my childhood book, Dracula and Frankenstein, which is Dracula by Bram Stoker. Now, I will preface this by saying Frankenstein is my preferred story in this book, but gotta talk about Dracula too, because that is the original vampire story. So, let's delve into why I like the story of Dracula. I'll start by showing you a picture in the book too, because they're pretty. How people didn't notice the blue skin guy, I don't know. But I will admit that quite a bit of my memory for the book Dracula is infiltrated by the 90s movie Dracula with Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder, which I really enjoyed and watched far too often, but I still really enjoyed it. It's also, this is the original vampire story, and it also has Dr. Van Helsing in it, which a lot of movies and a lot of lore have come out of regarding these guys. So one of the things that is really interesting about the story of Dracula is a lot of it is written in letter format, because it is about the main characters who are lovers, or I guess dating, depending on what you would consider it for the time. And Jonathan Harker is going to Transylvania to work with Dracula because he works with property sales, I think, and so he's going to handle the estate of that. And so he is riding back home to his sweetheart and is living this whole adventure in going to Dracula and meeting Dracula and that and staying there for a while. And it's all written, you can see, in journals between Mina and Jonathan Harker. And so part of the premise is that Jonathan Harker ends up getting sick while he's at Dracula's, and then she has to come back to him, and Dracula ends up coming back and forth with London, but he ends up needing to go back to his homeland. So a lot of the lore of what we believe from Van Helsing and how to kill vampires, a lot of it started with the book Dracula, which it's very old, to be honest with you. Back there, they were not as sexy, as you can see, as they are in movies like Twilight and what we read nowadays, but a lot of the facts are the same. They're killed with stakes, they need to rest in the coffin which is full of the dirt of their homeland. I don't think that's the case anymore in most stories, but here he needs the dirt from his actual homeland in Pennsylvania in order to replenish himself and to be strong. And so it's just a lot of fun to read because it lets you know, it's almost like it's the grandfather of all vampire stories. So if you haven't read it, I would strongly recommend reading Dracula because it's fun to see how things were looked upon different and how similar they are nowadays too. I mean, now the difference is, back then I think people really believed, like, it's the way that people were buried with cages on top of their graves so they couldn't come back to life, right? Or bells that if they were buried alive, they could ring a bell. We don't have to worry about that nowadays with modern science, and also a lot of the diseases that there are a lot of diseases that people could have had back in the day that would now be what they would assume was vampirism. And we know, like the allergy, don't know what it's called, but there's an allergy to actual sunlight where it burns your skin, and that's, you know, where vampires can't go out in the sun kind of situations, or where they need to drink blood. There's all these different diseases that have this kind of problem, the really pale skin, same thing. Like, they're all things that can be explained away by modern science, but back then people didn't have the science and they didn't understand it. And so that's where a lot of these fears from monsters and Dracula and things like that came from. So if you like vampire stories, I would really recommend reading Bram Stoker's Dracula. It is the grandfather of vampire stories, and honestly, it's not huge. It's a lot of fun. You get to see kind of where a lot of these ideas came from, and you get to see how the vampire lore kind of began. And I mean, it's got Van Helsing in it. It's got a lot of the big players in it that you always expect. And so it's also a picture of a wolf. In this one, Dracula can change his shape into other animals and creatures, so he does do that in order to get around. And it's just an all-around kind of creepy guy, which is kind of what you would expect from him. And Mia's best friend does end up dying because of a vampire bite and coming back. Ooh, apparently there is let's see when I read this last. What is in here? It is a ticket to see Mamma Mia from 2003 with what is now my husband. No, I think this was The Lion King. Because if it was 2003, we just started dating. Maybe it was. I don't know. It does not even say the play on it. That's kind of funny. And I can't do the math fast enough in my head of where my husband was living at the time. But there you go. This is how old this book is. I literally have a theater ticket from 2003 in it. God, I'm old. But yes, so read Dracula. It's coming up to October. If you're ever going to read it, now is the time to do it. And if you do, let me know in the comments what you thought of it, whether or not you enjoyed it. And yeah, thanks for stopping by on my very scattered book review. And I hope you guys have a great Monday. Well, not Monday, but whatever day of the week it is for you. So happy reading, and thanks for stopping by.